Welcome to the Fly Culture Podcast, bringing you interviews, reviews and fishing tips. Here's your host, Pete Tigers.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Fly Culture Podcast. In today's episode, I'm out on the river and I'm standing in a pool at the moment looking for some rising fish. The river here has just started to wake up a little bit after what's felt and seemed like an incredibly long spring, but there's a massive plume of midges in front of me. It's my home river. It's the River Tor. We've seen one mayfly come off and we're waiting. Yeah, there's something else just come. I think it might have been yellow may just in front of me as well. But I'm thrilled to be joined by Harry Chance today, and I met Harry via social media, and then when we had a fly culture gathering at the Orvis store in Stockbridge, I got chatting to him there, and then he's incredibly passionate about the fishing down here in Devon, and I thought it would be really nice to get somebody else's view, because I'm always banging on about what the fishing means to me here, but I thought it would be really nice for someone else to tell us what it means to them too. So Harry, it's great to have you along on the Fly Culture Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, thanks, Pete. It's lovely to be here. Bit of river that obviously it isn't my home bit of river. My home bit of river's about 15 miles sort of south of here, the Tean and onto Dartmoor. So this is a very different river for me. It's lovely to be here. And as you say, it does feel like it's been a very long spring. The Tean is still probably 10 days behind. We live in the shadow of the moor, and for a chunk of it, it runs through a very steep gorge, and it is wooded on both sides, so it gets very little sunlight. It does feel that we've been waiting a long time for some rising fish. I have found some rising fish on Dartmoor, mainly when it's been bright sunshine and days that you would naturally think, not a great day for dry fly fishing, but actually the fish up there they're Dartmoor trout. They live on the edge of starvation for most of their lives, and they have started to. Those fish are starting to rise. So I've been having some fun fishing, but it's just nice to be on a different river.
Fantastic. And the really interesting thing this morning is that it's bright sunshine. We're sort of standing, and I've got my sunglasses off at the moment because we're sort of looking at shaded areas, looking for signs of rising fish. And I've done a few podcasts from here in the past, but Harry, how would you describe from the little of what you've seen so far to listeners, so we can put them, as we fish today, so we can put them in the picture and give them a sense of what it looks like and feels like?
Yeah, it's sort of, I suppose it's not what I would call a Dartmoor river, even though the Tor does rise on Dartmoor, and it's very different, sort of 10 miles upstream. But I guess would this be middle river here?
Absolutely.
Meandering pools into a glide and riffle flowing into the pool behind us. Shady, lovely little lies under tree roots that you just think, yes, there may well be, fish lurking tucked into the far bank, which is slightly steeper on the far side than it is, with some debris, nice woody debris in the water. There is colour. It is a river. We do have, certain runoff issues. It does carry colour. It comes through agricultural land. It's just typical, what I would call middle river pools and glides. It's a stunning looking bit of water with, as I say, at the moment, really good midge hatch coming off, with other interspersed with, I think I've just seen another mayfly. Stunning bit of water.
We're seeing some spinners here as well. And Harry makes a really great point that we're standing on true left bank on a sort of a shingle beach really at the moment. The river has been high for a lot of the season, and it's only this week, and this is about the 25th, 26th or something of May, and I've not been able to fish it for trout at all with dry flies. The way it seems to lend itself really well here is to spot those rising fish and target them individually. And I found as an angler as well that it's made me be able to hit those fish a little bit better because I'm expecting that take. So if I've made a good cast, it's in the right place. And one of the things here as well is that they tend to be, you can catch a nice fish here that we're used to, and Harry being an expert, what's the speed you need to hit fish on Dartmoor?
Quick.
And this is the exact opposite. So you've got to sort of wait a little bit and you see somebody come up and eat it. And he made a very good point about being steep on the far side. And that means that it is a little bit deeper. So it sort of works nicely for us as right-handers. If we see somebody rise, it's a little bit deeper there. It's shaded. There's an ash tree down upstream that I've left. For the reasons Harry says, that woody debris, and I think that can only help fish and their habitat and everything else that goes with it. But it's early. It's only, we've been talking a fair bit. It's still pretty early at the moment, and the plan is to walk the river. And when it is your home river, you want to show somebody what it means to you. And I've already talked about some of the fish that we've caught. And yesterday I was fishing down here and managed to catch a nice fish that I had to wait on, and saw it rise, managed to get into position. It was a really nasty cast because there's a big oak tree comes across a good half of the pool, and the pool drops away, so you can only get so far. And then the branches and again, I don't really trim everything to make it really easy. The fish are really important to me, and shade and everything else as well. And so it was quite a complex cast to get it in. And the fish, I was saying to Harry, don't feel as though they're fully in feeding positions, but they're pretty close. So they're on the softer water of the main flow. That seems to be where it is. And they're hugging that far bank very, very tightly. But I've seen some caddis come off, seen some spinners. Harry's just pointed something out as well. So we're going to sort of wait here for a couple of minutes. I'm going to show him a little bit more of the beat as well. And we're going to have a walk round and we're going to wait for that moment, see if we can see a fish rise. The lovely thing about these podcasts is, and I was saying to Harry before I turned it on, is that, we just talk as it happens. So there's no plan, there's no script. We might get beaten up by the fish. We may get lucky. Who knows at the moment? But that's really a typical day's fishing. We always want one of those magical, memorable days. But sometimes it doesn't play out that way. But my hope is that the may fly around as well, and that will be around sort of lunchtime. So it may be that we get a few of those hatching. That may bring some fish up as well, and we'll look for those telltale slashy rises. But we're going to have a little walk upstream. I'm just going to point some of these spots out to him, and then we might walk down to one of the other pools as well. Have a look there. We're sort of in spots that if I think something's going to happen, that'll probably be the spot that we see somebody rise and work from there. But I'm excited to show somebody who hasn't been here or has fished this part of the river before a little bit of what it's about. So it's very exciting from that point of view too. We walked downstream a little bit to a pool called 4 Acres, and it's a long pool. There's a run-in. There's 2 actual little run-ins. It's running against the far bank. As I said, we're standing on true left bank as you look downstream. And the flow is middle to far side there. There's a bubble line against the far bank there. And this pool often for me, if there's fish rising, this sort of sets the tone for that moment in the day. So I know that if I'm going to see fish rising in here at this stage, that this is the place it's going to be. So nobody's got going yet. There are odds and sods hatching at the moment. We got the dog. You may hear him splashing around in the background as well, having a look round. But we're looking towards the head of the pool now. And I said to Harry, look, we can sit around and wait for a little bit. But I'm sort of conscious as well that he's got a day off work. He's going to, I want him to fish and I want him to have a go. So he's going to set up with a duo setup and fish that faster water and see if anyone is home there at the moment. Harry, what are you going to set up when you're fishing duo? What are you going to? What is in your mind? You're looking at the pool. You're looking at the run. What are your thoughts?
So normally, for my own fishing, I'd probably carry 2 rods. I'd carry a dry or dry dropper rod, or really, and I've got an 8'6". I'm going to be honest. I know that you would, by your own admission, say that you're a bit of a tackle tart. I am not. Most of my fishing is done on wild moorland streams. I've got 2 left feet and carrying a couple of extra pounds. So I can fall over on a flat pavement, and having sat on a couple of expensive or more expensive rods, I'm fishing today. I've got an 8'6" Shakespeare. I do have, I've got a 10-foot 3-weight rod, which currently is waiting for a new tip because that had a little accident. So I've got Shakespeare 4-weight. It's their Oracle 2, and for the fishing that I do, for where I go, I find that it's absolutely amazing. I don't pretend to be, I'm never going to win a casting championship, but I find that for the fishing that I do, I find that actually nowadays you can find a pretty cheap setup that will chuck a nice line. And so I've just brought this today, and we've just been talking, and you have more patience than me, Pete. You are happy. I'm happy to sit and wait and watch and talk and chat, but also I'm looking at a nice piece of water and I'm thinking I'd quite like to give it a go. And so I'm probably just going to fish some straight through mono, and just put a mark on. And I might fish dry dropper on the mono, put the dry on the dropper, or I might just put 2 nymphs on. I don't know. I'm just sort of still making that decision, and I haven't got to the point where I need to make that decision yet. But it may well just be 2 nymphs, and if it is, I'm going to start small. There's a midge hatch coming off, probably a little size 18, 2 mil bead probably. Fish 2 of those. I love a size 18 pheasant tail. Because they're so versatile. You change the collar on those nymphs, and I do a little bit of competition fishing, and they would be my sort of go-to nymphs, that or something scruffy. I do a lot of kick sampling through work and various bits, and it's amazing, the colours of, if you actually do a kick sample on a river and you look at the colours and you look at there's an awful lot of nymphs that have got a black or a dark head, and then there's just that colour change in the thorax, and you just think, yeah, actually, all different sizes, but the range of colours is amazing. But there's a lot of greens, a lot of browns, a lot of sort of orangey, and yeah, I've taught some amazing fly tyres, and I've been very lucky to have won. I won a box of nymphs tied by somebody who was 6 times river champion, to sponsor one of the rivers teams. It was given away as a prize, and I won that. And you put that under a fluorescent light, and the colours are just unbelievable. And you sort of think, they're flies that work. But I do think that sort of simple with just that tiny bit of change that collar from a bit of peacock, just even different peacocks, hurl, or using dyed pheasant tail. There's some great guys out there now, doing a lot of dyeing, and you just change that, and that's the only thing you change on the fly. And I fish small and simple, really. As I say, the Dartmoor trout and the teen trout that I chase, they're not the biggest fish, but they're usually fairly hungry. And if it looks fairly natural, but just with that maybe a little bit of an attractor, it works. And I always start natural. And then if you want to throw something, same with grayling. I once heard somebody, very, very, very good angler, say, why chuck the biggest, brightest pink thing at them to start with? Start natural. You can always chuck a big, bright pink thing if the natural's not working. But if you chuck the pink thing, how many fish does that scare to catch one? Start with your naturals. And I find that sort of mantra holds well for my fishing.
There's some great points there, and it made me think of a couple of things. One of our podcast guests, Paul Gaskell, spoke with great eloquence about that, and about with drab nymphs and then starting drab and then adding a little bit of colour should you need it. And I'm also reminded of Ollie Edwards, who sadly we lost recently, and something I think I saw him write or say was about the wing case of a nymph. And when they're close to hatching, it gets incredibly dark. And that was a big thing for me. And what Harry was saying about the tying a pheasant tail, that I started adding some black dubbing as a thorax there. And it worked really well for me as well. So those little things, and it's nice to remember things that we're shown by people who are no longer around as well, that sort of still ring with me to a great degree. So yeah, simple, keep it simple. And we were talking about fly boxes as well. And, you know, Harry was saying his is usually a complete mess. Mine isn't, because I don't have many flies that I use. I've got a few in my fly box at the moment. It's only because I've changed it over recently, but the flies that I'm using are on my fly patch, and that's very few of them. And, you know, I've got some mayflies. We're seeing more mayflies starting to hatch now. I've seen some stoneflies coming off. I actually saw one lone blue-winged olive as well. So there is some stuff about at the moment. I think things need to warm up a little bit before they start rising, but we'll wait and see what happens. And the sun, so that you can picture it, comes down into and follows the flow down the river, but as the day goes on, the sun comes around behind the fish. So what we'll be doing, the plan is, if we're looking for risers, is to look for those shaded areas at the moment as well. And we've got lots of oaks along the river here as well that come right across the river, give plenty of shade for fish as well. So if they want to rise, and one of the things I always say is that, you know, remember, trout don't have eyelids. So if it is bright in their eyes, they're not going to put their eyes right into the sunlight. And that's worth bearing in mind if you're going to photograph a fish as well. Think about where the sun position is when you photograph that fish, and try and keep their eyes right out of the sun, because they can't blink out the way of it. So that's worth bearing in mind. I'm so pleased Harry has set up to fish while we're waiting as well. And like I say, it's one of these days that he's got a day off work. I'm here a lot, so I'm patient, and I'll wait for my one shot. It may be one shot I get. And like I said, the one I had yesterday, you know, I caught the fish and thought, wow, that's cool, snipped off and went home. But I'm incredibly lucky that I get to fish a fair bit. I'm going to be busy with the new magazine coming soonish and getting that out to everybody. But so I'm sort of trying to make hay a little bit, and it's lovely to be able to share these moments, share this bit of water with people, and see how they get on. So what I'll do is, when Harry's set up, I will talk you through what he's doing and if he's having any joys, and we go from there. And then the idea is, because he'll have that set up, we'll walk past the first pool, island pool that we started in, see if anyone's rising there. I may even thrust some bamboo in his hand as well. Slightly nervous given him saying how clumsy he is as well, but it might be worth a try. And then we might walk up to the top, and there's a pool there again, because he's set up that way, that lends itself well to duo. I call it honey hole. No idea why I call it honey hole, because we don't catch many fish in there, but it just looks a honey hole. So we'll see if we can work some of his magic there as well. Well, Harry, I think it's fair to say you are no longer a stranger to the ways of the Tor.
No, I've just fished a lovely bit of water head of a pool, which, in my humble opinion, it did hold fish, and I found one. You know, stunning little beautiful Tor trout, but I thought it might hold a few more. And as I say, it doesn't give its fish up lightly. You know, you've probably heard Pete say that with other people down here, but having just fished a run that I was expecting, you know, a couple of fish out of, I found one, so I'm a happy man. But she doesn't give her fish up easily.
So the plan is, as I said earlier, is to walk up now. We're just walking back from 4 acres. We're going to have a look for a riser again in Island Pool. And if we see nothing there, we're going to walk up to Honey Hole. And then there's a pool above that if fish are rising, they'll be there. And what we're going to do with these, we're not going to speck the water with dries. We're going to hopefully see somebody rise at some stage. And that mixture of hatch is still going on. So there's all sorts of, I saw some olive uprights as well. There's all sorts of stuff coming off at the moment. And I think the fun is going to be, if we see a rise, what's it going to be eating? Now, the mayfly is probably going to give us a pretty good clue, because it's going to be a splashy sort of rise. But the rest we're going to have to try and figure out. So that's going to be a fun part of it. And like Harry said, you earn that fish, and this river doesn't give them up easily. So if you're catching fish, you're doing something good. Well, we're just waiting to see if we can see a rise or not. Harry asked me an interesting question. He said, you speak to a lot of people up and down the country, which I do, and abroad as well. And he asked me what I felt the state of fishing was, were there younger people coming into it? And I talked to him a little bit about, trying to connect groups of people. And even via this podcast, I know friendships have formed and the magazine as a result of it. And I think if these connections remain strong and continue to grow, I think that's good for us. And of course, we talked about the TV program, the Mortimer and Whitehouse, and Harry had some interesting thoughts, because I said, I'm sure in some way, shape or form that's impacting fishing. But how do you feel that is with reaching the wider general public about waterways and everything else?
So, yeah, I was just saying, you were talking about the impact on fishing, and I think that maybe that program, my wife is not a fisherman. She once kindly, Pete's just pointing out a rise on the other side of the river and against the far bank. My wife, she kindly did a little video of me, the start of last season, might have even been the season before. And in her words, yep, this is just as boring as last year. Came across very, very nicely on the clip. But she will sit and watch Mortimer and Whitehouse, and she definitely has a better understanding. Bearing in mind she lives with a bore like me who talks about fishing and not a lot else. But she has a better understanding from that programme about the issues surrounding waterways, the problems that we're facing with British rivers, that they've highlighted. And I think they've reached an audience, not just about the fishing, but to say, actually, these are our rivers and they're in, they are facing challenges on multiple levels and from multiple sources, and I think it's put it out there to a big wide audience that actually these are the veins of our lifeblood. There's another rise, same fish. It is our artery. For thousands of years, waterways have been important, whether it was the Vikings coming up rivers to burn, pillage and steal, but they have provided food, they've provided all sorts for thousands of years. Our agriculture has been based around rivers, and yes, agriculture's changed greatly, but 150 years ago, these rivers were providing the drinking water for a lot of cattle because we didn't have the mechanics, and at watermills, all our flour, our entire existence and our industrial revolution has been based on rivers, and we've sort of lost that connection. And I think that those guys are doing what they're doing in the platform that they have via the BBC, are reaching an audience and sort of saying these rivers are still out there and they need help.
Some great points there. And also, we were talking about the river here, and I was saying, Harry was asking about salmon fishing, and I said, well, in the 8-9 years, the fish is that's the third rise. It's not a big fish, but that's the third rise. So that's the start of something. My gut is that we probably walk up and see if things warm up a little bit more mayflies. I think there was a smaller fish, moved a little bit of water trying to take something, but you could see it wasn't of any great size. But we'll come back to him, and perhaps we've got him marked anyway. But also in the time that I've been fishing here, and I was saying, and I've talked on here many times before about the salmon runs and how there were only 53 last year, and how I keep trying and trying and trying, and more importantly, the fish keep trying, but how that's changed. So when we'd had a lift in the river, the term finding down pretty much doesn't exist that much now, because what happens is the river stays up high, it drops, but it keeps colour the whole time. And it's only the best time now is almost when the height's almost gone out of it, but the colour eventually has gone. That's when you're game on. So you might be, as I talked many times on here before about the gauges and everything else, but the problem is that height's going, but the colour's still there. So they're not really finding down in the traditional sense. And I was saying about the major tributary of the river here is the River Mole. We've got a couple of others as well. But we've got the Lapford Yeo and we've got the Little Dart. They're the main tributaries, but the mole where it joins the Tor is a similar sort of size. And I think it was that's fed from Exmoor rather than Dartmoor, but that used to run a lot clearer, and I think that kept the water clearer for longer. But I've noticed now, be it maize crops, be it whatever it may be, other farming practices that have led to more coloration of that river, and people who've been fishing this a whole lot longer than me have probably noticed that more. Is that something we're just going to have to keep putting up with?
So I'll fess up now and say that I actually work Monday to Friday. I work for the Environment Agency. I'm an agricultural regulatory officer, and I work on the Torridge, which is next door to the Tor. I work for the Environment Agency because I'm a fisherman, and I couldn't shout from the sidelines and not sort of, agriculture is my background. And when I saw the advert, my wife went, "That's the job for you." And I went for it. And I now work for the Environment Agency. And we are doing a lot of work. There are 83 officers who just regulate agriculture. And we are looking, we've got a team of 12 across Devon and Cornwall. We are working very hard in catchments with Natural England and other partners, Westcountry Rivers Trust, various other partners to try and improve water quality from agriculture. And it is a slow process. There are a lot of farms out there. There's been underinvestment. There are a myriad of problems that, you've only got to read a newspaper or look at the news to know that actually there are an awful lot of problems in the world. And, on any given day, yes, as fishermen, we live in our bubble and we are very, very passionate about our rivers and the environment as a whole. But, sometimes things go wrong. There have been issues on rivers across the country, but in Devon and Cornwall, we're working very hard, and most farmers, to be fair, they're all trying to do their bit. They're all trying to invest in their infrastructure. There are new grants coming forward from DEFRA. There are new things happening, that hopefully will improve agriculture. I'm not a scientist. I'm a layman, and the opinions today are very much my own. But I definitely think that there are improvements being made. There's been, I walked the Axe 2 winters ago looking at reds. There's been a lot of work done. There's YouTube videos out there on the Axe project, and walked with a fisheries officer who, he said to me, "Yeah, you know what, I'm seeing fish when I haven't seen fish for a number of years." So that we are doing, on the ground, we're doing what we can. We're a fairly passionate team across the country. The National Ag team, that's just, most of us are in it because we care. We're never going to become millionaires and retire on a government salary. So we're here because we're passionate and we care. And being a fisherman, I also care from another point of view. That fish is still rising on the just behind it, on the far bank. And what I would say is, from my point of view, I'm reasonably active on social media. I look at a lot of stuff. I see a lot of people talking about potential pollutions, but if you see something that you're not happy with on a river, and it's a river that you fish a lot, whether it's sewage, whether it might be an agriculture issue, it could be sediment, report it, and don't report it 2 days later, because that realistically isn't help. Take some photographs, ring it in, email the photographs in, ask to be told about it. If they will ask you when you report on the helpline, and I'll give Pete, he's probably already got it, but I'll ask him to put it in if he puts a picture out or the link on this, that helpline, all anglers should have it. All people walking their dogs down by the river should have it. If you see something, please ring in and report it. Government works on big data. Decisions are made on data, and if it doesn't get reported, then if it's not reported, it hasn't happened, because and that's how the Environment Agency can go to government and say, this is what we're seeing, and that's my big thing. And as I say, please don't report it the next day. If you see something, the river suddenly changes colour, for whatever reason, that's probably putting fish under stress. So as a responsible angler, stop fishing for it, go and find some phone signal. I live in Devon. Phone signal is a rare commodity, and usually not next to a river. So yeah, go and find it and report it straight away. Don't think I'm going to carry on fishing because this is my day and I'll worry about it later. That's my sort of rant over on that one.
I think that's really cool, and I love your honesty and candor about a tricky topic for you to have to navigate. But one of the reasons I wanted to fish with Harry, because I wanted to fish with him, but secondly, because if you had listened, and I interviewed Fergal Sharkey a long time ago about the issues that he was bringing up, and he talked about people within the EA like Harry, who are fighting the corner of rivers, they're fighting the corner of the fish, and their environment. So I think that was really ballsy for you to stand up and say that. I wouldn't have put you under pressure to say that at all if you didn't want to. So thank you for doing that and putting yourself out there. And this, I hope, will make people think, actually, it's an easy tap in for us. And I know to say, well, EA, blah, 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 the same sort of story. But there are people within it that are fighting for us. And I think that's very, very noteworthy. So that, as Harry said, is his rant over. I will put details, and I'll ask him for the phone number at the end of this, along with his social media details, and we'll go from there. But we've seen a couple of small fish rise. One's gone 3 times, which that sort of bodes kind of well. I'm sort of happy just to mark them for the time being. We'll walk upstream and then come back down and see if anyone else has come into play, only because it's the smaller guys coming into play at the moment. Not that we're big fish hunting, but I think once they start, it means probably other things are going to start to limber up. And I always thought when I first fished these rivers many, many, many years ago, that it would always be the bigger fish that started feeding first because they need to eat a whole lot more. But it's not. It's often those smaller guys that will lead the way. And once they get going, then the other guys will come into play. The pool there, there's a bit of depth there. But I could see again by the movement, and he went 2 or 3 times. I think one went behind him. They were sort of smaller fish eating something. So I think we're going to wait. We're going to go up to Honey Hole. It's been nice having that part of the chat as well. It's lovely to talk about fishing, but we should also be talking about the issues that we're facing right now. So I'm just watching Harry work his nymphs through Honey Hole. And to describe it, the river here is relatively wide, but this is a little bit where it pinches, hits a far bank, and then comes back out again. And it's a small pool, probably 60, no, it's not even that, probably 35, 40 feet long. And against the far bank, it's a little bit deeper. And there's a pot there that could hold a fish. So he's going to work his nymphs through there. So it's been lovely to see. I was just, the dog had a little wander, so I went and hung out with him for a bit and saw Harry into a fish. So Honey Hole's thrown something out for him. He's thrown a couple of little fish out for us, a couple of nice, they're all beautiful fish actually, but really, really nicely done. That was some fun, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was really nice. Just fishing tight in against the bank, sort of a deeper little glide down the side of a sort of fallen tree, so that when you look at the water, it just looks like it should hold a fish. And found a nice fish. It went aerial a few times on me. Strong fish. We were just talking sort of off mic as we were. Pete took a photograph and bits, and just talking about the fact that this is mid-river, it's quite a wide river, so when the water pushes, these fish have got to be strong. They've got to sit and hold in a current, and it's just lovely to, they're all beautiful, whether they're 3 inches or 2 pounds. It's just brown trout for me are one of the most beautiful fish there is. It's just really nice to find a slightly better fish, and we'll keep fishing on up.
And that was nicely done. It's a nice little spot, this. As I said, it's lovely that Harry has de-Jona'd Honey Hole for us as well for this season. So that's kind of cool. I've been watching the pool above, which I had expectations for. And although the river's dropped back a fair bit, and I was pointing out to Harry the rocks just a few minutes ago, and you can see how even they're wet and have dropped back a fair bit already. And it feels as though the river was holding its height and has now dropped back relatively quickly. But I think this pool still has, from a rising, they tend to sit at the back of the pool and rise there, and I think there's still a little bit too much push at the back of it. It may be we poke our nose, it's pretty close to the top of the beat. We've got the sort of true right bank, but because the pool's so deep, being the gentleman that we are, that walking up through there would be problematic anyway. So I sort of, when the dog wandered off, I sort of stood with him and we watched the pool. He sort of knows the drill here, that when we fish honey hole, that he'll wander off to the other side. There's like a grassy bank, and I think it's probably because the water's still a little deeper that he's having to wade in, for him, relatively deep water, so he can get out the water for a bit. So I think that's probably why he likes it. But that was, we've got probably half the pool to fish. And like I say, it's not a particularly big pool for the size of the river, but perhaps it may be that the fish are slightly more... more fish in a smaller area. Perhaps there's an argument for that as well.
Yeah, and it comes back to fishing the water that's in front of you, and I'm not fishing it really with the rod that I'd like to fish it with potentially, or necessarily the sort of. I would be fishing it with a 10'3". I'm fishing it with an 8'4", or 8'6" 4. But if you fish the water and you use rivercraft, you can still catch fish. And that's something, I talk to a lot of people. I'm very lucky. I use the fish pass a lot across Devon and Cornwall. I fish Dartmoor and I fish the Tean. And I fish a lot of sort of variety of water, albeit within the two counties. But fish the water that's in front of you, and I think that would be sort of a takeaway for me, that this is 3 times the size of the Cherry Brook on Dartmoor, but I'm looking at this little run, and if I was looking at this on Dartmoor, I'd fish it the same way.
And that's a good point. And, I often saying here, foam is home, and that is that oxygenated, slightly foamy water that is holding a conveyor belt of food. It's got oxygen for the fish. And like I said at the beginning, what we're trying to figure out is, right, it's still early-ish season. The water definitely, for me, even over this week, feels a little bit warmer, and I don't mean warm by that, but than how cold it's actually been. So from that point of view, I'm thinking, right, they're probably not in that faster water, but they're probably on the seams of it, on the edges of it. And so a slightly more even pace, not quite as fast. And I'm guessing, I didn't see hook, but I would think, yeah, Harry's pointing and those sorts of spots. And like you say, no matter how big a river is, if you break it down into sections, then you can kind of figure out where the fish are. But foam is home is a saying that I've used over the last 15, 18 years, and it suited me rather well. So I'm looking for those lines and then just trying to figure out. And like I'm saying about the pool above, I know it pretty well. So at the tail, of course, the water's going to be little bit faster, but the fish sit generally near that tail 10 feet up from there, but because it's a little bit faster, they may be a little bit further up in the pool. And our issue may be that we can't get to them, but we'll go poke our noses in and see if anyone's home there, just in case. I've been watching it like a hawk, like I say, and I've not seen anyone go yet. The hatch is still sort of trickling away at the moment. So yeah, we'll just keep watching and waiting. You'll know, if you're a regular listener to a podcast, that I'm not originally from Devon. I came down here 20 odd years ago, and I'm guessing, judging by your accent, Harry, as well, you're not Devon born and bred?
No, I Shropshire was home. So, and we were just over the border actually into Wales. So the River Rue that runs down through Berriew and is a tributary of the Severn was my home river growing up, about sort of 10 miles south of Welshpool, and did a little bit. We were very lucky. My parents had friends who were on the Vernway, and so as a little kid, I didn't catch a lot, but would go up there. And we used to take family holidays on South Uist quite often, and with cousins and whatnot. So I was very, very lucky. Some poor father had to row us around in a boat on a brown trout loch, while the grown-ups went and fished for the big fish. We got to chase brown trout. And anybody that's got small children and is teaching them to fly fish will know actually the easiest way to do it is to chuck the line out of the back of the boat and row like mad as the parent, because it stops all sorts of wind knots. And a black pennel on the point and a Cape McLaren on the dropper served me very well in my younger years. And I was very lucky. At school, I had a pottery teacher, Mr. Kenwood, who used to take us, if we weren't in the summer, if we weren't playing cricket, we got to go fly fishing. We would go to hatchery just outside Telford, or fishery outside Telford, that had a sort of couple of ponds. They were mainly a trout farm, but they'd made a lake. I think the lake had come, sort of in that boom of the 80s. We would go there and chase rainbows. And so sort of that's how it started for me, really. And I moved to Devon 5 years ago. My wife had moved down. We actually met 20 odd years ago up in Cumbria, and life took us in opposite directions, and we came back together. And she was working down here, and I was in Newbury at the time, where I couldn't really afford to fish. I'm going to be brutally honest. And I came down here, and we live in a village just off the River Tean. So 2 miles away, and we've got dogs. We were walking the dogs up and down this river, and I was like, oh yeah, I won't be able to afford to fish this, and discovered, actually Devon fishing is much more suited to my pocket.
And has fishing always been in your life? I know you said, and it's fascinating, isn't it, that many of us will remember a teacher for whatever reason. I remember Mr. Wells kept me on the straight and narrow when I was going off the rails a fair bit, but there's always someone, and it's fascinating that you mentioned a teacher who actually helped grow your knowledge and passion for fly fishing. And is it something that's always remained from those early years, or did you sort of go off for a while and then come back to it a little bit later? Yeah,
I sort of work and time took me away from it. So sort of my later teenage years, beer and other bits took over. I was very lucky. I still fished into my early 20s. I lived in a place called Ascombe, so anybody in Cumbria will know, River Emont, and there was in the local pub, the publican was a fisherman, and we'd sort of have the odd day out, but it wasn't like it is now for me, which means that I'm fishing a lot more. So I through my late 20s and into my sort of 30s, I drifted away. I did little bits, but nothing major. It was really coming down here and finding the Tean, and latterly the Dartmoor and the Westcountry fish pass, which has access to a huge amount of fishing across Devon and Cornwall, and is sort of expanding further north now. But there's some really affordable fishing down here, sort of beats that for £6-7 a day you can go and have some great small stream fishing with actually some remarkably big fish. And so it's really in the last 5-6 years that I've really come back to it, and living where I live. And I before I did this podcast, I sort of said to my wife, can I say that I'm selfish? And she said, you're not selfish, you just make time for your hobby. And while I'm still young, river fishing's my thing, or youngish. At some point, the knees are not going to like it so much, and Pete will attest. My ankles are not the best already. Too many years of rugby, so actually, there's going to come a point where scrabbling in and out of Dartmoor rivers isn't going to be the best thing for my health. So I am going to make the most of it while I'm still able.
And what do you like? I know today we fished together, and I've sort of shown you some of the pools and stuff like that. Is that how you like to? You talked about how you fish with your buddy. Do you like to fish side by side, or do you like to wander off and say, "I'll meet you in half hour"? How do you like to do it?
It just depends on how we're feeling. I think there are times when we'll fish together and we'll just be chatting while we're fishing, or one of us will be fishing and the other one will be on the bank. Sometimes we'll wander off and leapfrog each other. And that's the nice thing. If you're comfortable fishing with a friend and you work well together, then actually, it's like, I suppose it's like having that friend that you're comfortable in silence. It's that I take, when I'm fishing on the team quite often, I take my dog with me. I've got a little terrier. Technically it's my wife's, but if she gets left behind and I go fishing, she throws a pretty big sulk. So, because actually it's quite nice just to go sometimes on your own. But if you've got the dog there, you don't look quite as mad when you're talking to the dog as if you were just talking to yourself about what you're doing. Yeah.
You're exactly right about the dog. And I was talking to my dog, Montana, who's with us today, who's been on very, very good form. He's just seen a branch come off the tree or a twig come off that he thought might be a fish, and he's watching intently. We're seeing some maize still hatching, but, the hunch hasn't paid out just as yet. It was interesting what you're saying, actually, Harry, about, you can decide on the day. And sometimes you get up, don't you? And you think, actually, I'd like to catch a few fish today. And you want to go and do your own little thing for a bit. And when you fish with somebody, you can just you don't even have to say anything, do you? You can wander off somewhere and then come back, or just say, I'm going down here somewhere and having a look there. And that's the nice thing. But there is very occasionally times where you just think, actually, it'd be nice to catch a few, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got into doing some competition fishing. And because I used to play rugby, I'm now sort of a little bit fat and old to be doing that. But I still have that little competitive streak at times, and I enjoy competition fishing. It's not for everybody, but I've learned a huge amount. Haven't been doing it very long, but yeah, I've learned a huge amount. And actually, some of the guys there have been really, really helpful with tips. And sometimes, I'll go and practice, and I think, I'm going to try and put a few fish in the net today or in the next hour, and that might be the only fishing I do all day. I go and have an hour, fish hard, and sort of take something away from it. Maybe practice a technique, try something different. Flies have evolved, but over the last, since the first one was tied, but it's trying different things, trying older techniques. People, I was talking to somebody, we were up on the River Tees in County Durham, and his really successful technique was swinging spiders. I was fishing nymphs, he swung spiders. A fly that has been a North Country spider, I don't know when the first one was tied, but well over 100 odd years ago, and actually those flies still work. It's just trying different things, and that's what I like about fishing. You don't have to do the same thing every time you go on the same bit of water. You can try different techniques.
Harry's just given me a poke and looks like he's seen something, so there looks like there might be a game starting afoot. That's towards the back of the pool, and that may be one that if we see him go again, and we've seen before we went up to Honeyhole, I talked about a fish that had risen 3 times. We'll be keeping an eye out along there, and I had a fish marked for Harry from yesterday as well, which I've not seen signs of as yet, and I still think our odds will improve as the sun moves around in the pool. It's well shaded here as well, so that's why I kind of like it. The pace of the water's right, it's not too fast. So I think we're going to hang here for a little bit more. If we see that fish down there go again, it looked, was it a splashy-ish sort of rise? Yeah, it could have eaten a mayfly, so it was a splashier sort of rise. So that may come into play shortly as well. So I can see Harry's setting up now, and that nymphing setup he had off is being replaced now. And it looks as though he's going into dry fly mode as well. So it's kind of starting to get, it's been an exciting morning already, but I'd love him to see some of these fish rise. I'm just watching a mayfly go down the pool now, and it's coming to a spot where I mentioned that I had the fish marked for Harry from yesterday, but that's sort of more in the sun now. But where it's sort of, you can see how these things attract the fish, and you can see how a twitch of a fly can bring a fish into play as well. You watch these flies skitter across the surface, and that one's made it. He's got into the air and flown away. I was hoping it would go into a shaded area, and we'd wait and see what would happen. But part of me as well wants them to make it as well. I'm always for the outsider, but it looks like they're getting a good shot at the moment because the trout aren't really aggressively biting them just at the moment. And it's, putting this into context, it's not a flotilla of mayflies coming down, but they're about. And, it may just be that it needs a few more of the hatch to intensify just a little bit more to bring the fish into play. But yeah, I'm kind of looking for those splashier rises and the signs of a fish eating those. So we've got a situation here that Harry's sort of not halfway across, but we've seen a fish rise. Looks like it sipped some stuff. So he's got a size 20 parachute Adams on. He's putting a big mend in the line, and it's risen tight to the bank 2 or 3 times. It's not a regular feeder, but it has risen a couple of times. So he's working his way across. He's sort of getting an idea now of where he needs to be, and it's sort of almost he has to run it pretty close to the bank. He's sort of in the ballpark now, actually. That's a good shot, but just drifted by, and he's right in the right spot now, and it's where the fish has risen. There's sort of a tiny little cut in the bank, and the fish is sort of using that cut and just, it looks like moving out to take something every now and again. But yeah, he's definitely in the ballpark there. And we'd seen him rise, and then he ate the size 20 Adams, and the fish is on. He's putting side strain. It's gone downstream. My dog, I've just got to grab a little bit because he'll want to see. He likes seeing the fish go back. But yeah, fish shot off downstream. It's sort of, Harry's got some side strain on it now, just trying to keep it from slipping down into the next pool. Just see the fish now. Beautiful fish. Water temperature feels cooler actually than earlier. I don't know if that's because we've been out the water for a bit. Harry's saying the hole in his waders is saying it's reasonably cold, but it's got the fish, I would say 8-9 inches. It shot off. I thought it was a bigger fish at first. Did you? Yes, yeah. Harry's saying it went downstream very, very quickly, and yeah, he's got this one now. I think we'll get this one in the net. He's just working. It's just on the lip of the pool, and hopefully won't be going downstream too far, and we'll be able to get this guy in. But that was thrilling to see, and yeah, I'd switched off for just a couple of seconds while we were just chatting where we thought the fish might be, and just waited for a set, and then just as soon as I turned it off, Harry set into the fish, which was great to see. I've got my dog here. He loves seeing fish coming in. He's not interested in running out to them or anything like that. It is just purely like seeing the fish. It's almost his work. He comes from just come off at the last second at the tail of the pool. Good job though, mate. Good job. Rising fish. And he fought dirty, didn't he? Yeah. Yes. Yeah, he was just saying that he was just on the tail of the pool. And it looked like it was, I think really what he did there by keeping the fish from going down was the perfect job, because I think there was a good chance it was going to be game over. But that's a lovely moral victory. And that, is great skill. It was a pleasure to watch the fishing there and see the fish come up, eat the fly that we'd been waiting, and like I say, patience. And it's much easier, isn't it, Harry, that if you've seen that fish, you kind of know how the game's going to unfold. And I talked a little bit about that before, that when you've seen that, you're sort of semi-prepared for it, and there was no mistaking when you set on that fish.
No, he'd just eaten a natural before, sort of as I was making my cast, and he came straight back up and ate mine as it drifted over him. But then he knows his habitat. He knew exactly where he wanted to go, and he went straight downstream. And as Pete said, I thought it was a bigger fish than it was, but he was sitting right in the tail of the pool. And I put as much side strain on it as I want, as I sort of dare. and he used the water to his advantage, and he just kept that pressure on. And unfortunately, he won that one at the end. But sort of, as Pete said, slight moral victory. He was rising, I covered him, and he ate my fly. So from that sense, it was one of those long distance releases.
So we'd fished in a spot, and we thought it was a smaller fish whacked to mayfly, and I gave him the mayfly a couple of times, nothing there. And then Harry put on, what were you fishing? So he just put on a small CDC emerger and had the fish on and briefly and has come off. So another moral victory. There are a few fish rising, smaller ones. We thought that one was a smaller fish. What sort of size? Yeah, 8-9 inches. And we thought with the May, it was kind of in my mind, we'd sort of said that, if we threw at it and it ate that, it was probably going to try and drown it as the smaller fish did. And I was kind of in my mind thinking that it probably wasn't going to stick if it came for it. It didn't come for it. But yeah, a smaller emerger. So although the Mays are around, it doesn't look as though they're really eating them with any vigor right now. So, we've learned something. That's the nice thing about fishing with somebody. You sort of kind of think something through, suggest it, try it, it doesn't work, so somebody else has a go with a different sort of pattern, and lo and behold, they hook the fish, which is pretty cool. But I think what we might do is leave this for a bit and then walk back downstream, see if we got any fish rising down there. It's encouraging that we've seen a few in here. It's not the bigger guys who have come out to play yet, and it may be that they haven't decided that it's the mayfly that they want to eat right now. But the emergers, there's obviously some smaller stuff coming off. I think I can see the odd olive upright actually, so it may be those that are hatching. That may be what they're eating. So we've learnt something from there. That splashy rise turned out to be a smaller fish rather than a mayfly rise, and sometimes those smaller guys will still hit that mayfly pattern because it looks like some food, but didn't. But Harry made some magic happen there, so that was pretty cool. We walked downstream and had a little bit of a look. There wasn't much going on. We saw one rise, and it's been sort of, I'd describe it as a dour day with moments of brightness. And we've come back to Island Pool again. It's in the shade, probably 50% of it now is probably in shade from trees on our side and on the far side of the bank. So there's a sunlit part down the middle of it. But it's fascinating for me when you're fishing with somebody for the first time and seeing things that they're doing. You think, oh, that's a really good idea. And when I fish, I keep my rod tip to the water and I add slack by either when I'm casting, I'll put a reach cast in, or I will add slack as I go along. And what I'll do is sort of move the rod tip up and down to impart some slack to give me that drift. And I keep the rod tip down only for my personal thing because I know I can hit the fish better that way for me. That's what works for me, and I've done it for so many years that it worked for me. But I was really interested to see how Harry was fishing with a long leader, and I'm talking long 14, 15 feet or so. And then he was fishing with his rod tip up and to keep more line off of the water. But that was a fascinating way you were imparting slack as well. Can you tell us a little bit about what you were doing and what you were looking to achieve with that? I've done my best to sort of describe the setup, but how you were adding the slack as well.
Yeah, for me, I tend to fish, if I'm fishing dry fly, I tend to fish long leaders. And I'm just trying to keep my line as much as I can off the water. And sort of, again, you're doing a bit of a reach cast, but if I can keep that line off the water and I've just got the leader, it's much finer and less, I suppose, just creates less drag. And I find that I can flick the leader upstream that little bit and bounce the rod tip, and you're not creating disturbance on the water. A leader just by definition is a lot finer, and just trying to use the finer material of the leader to give me that, and it works for me. I think that's the beauty of fishing, isn't it? You know, some of the best casters and whatever, their technique might not be textbook, but actually it gets results, and it's something that has worked for me. I find, especially on, I suppose it's come from fishing sort of the Tean and Dartmoor, really smaller rivers. You haven't got as much line out. You're maybe standing in the bottom of a pool, casting into the tail of the pool above. The more line I can keep off the water, it just works. So yeah, that's why I sort of do that. But to be honest, until Pete sort of mentioned it, I hadn't really thought about the dynamics of why I do it. It's one of those that it's evolved with my fishing, and as I say, it does work. And I've been very lucky today. I've hooked a few, landed a couple, and done some long range release on a couple more that have just got the best of me.
The other thing we were talking about, and I've probably talked on here about this many times, is the manipulation of flies, and that was brought home. The mayflies sort of petered out a little bit now, but we were watching them go down the river. And again, we often talk about observation on here, and we ended up just chatting about how those flies were skittering across the surface of the water, and that must be very tempting to a fish when they're locked onto them. It's clear to us now that they're not on them right now. They're sort of aware of them, I would think, but they're not really hitting them. But the manipulation of a fly, which also can work with a caddis, but also, if you're slacker, slower water, a little twitch or manipulation from time to time can bring somebody out from somewhere. And I often think about it when I'm nymph fishing. And again, we talked about this, that instead of setting at the end of my drift, and I can understand why it makes 100% sense to me, but if the fishing's slow, then I will slowly try and induce a fish that way, because it feels to me often that a fish can be brought into play that wasn't feeding, and that nymph getting away from them, the urge to eat can override things a little bit, and it may make a fish bite. So I like that. But you like sort of a bit of manipulation, a little bit of skating, a little bit of skittering, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will quite often, if I'm fishing a smaller pool, and I sort of snuck in, maybe not quite at the tail, a bit higher up, that first cast, I will always let dry fly or even nymph. If I'm fishing dry fly, I'll let it bounce round and sort of skitter to the tail of the pool. It's one of those that you've got nothing to lose. If nothing rises for it, great. But it flies, when they're bouncing down a river, they're creating a bit of a wake. And that comes back to sort of my high stance quite often with the leader. I can manipulate a fly without creating any line wake, because it's just the leader that's sort of on the water. I will always skate a dry across the tail of a pool, whether it's on a river like this, sort of, and I will do the same with nymphs. If I'm throwing nymphs upstream, using French or Spanish leader, every so often I will let those nymphs come past me, drift round, and bring it on the dangle, because naturally those nymphs rise in the water as they come up to hatch out, and it's always worth trying. And it's amazing sort of the amount of times you hook a fish you fished up through traditionally, and then you let something drift down past you, and it's slightly unnatural, or with a dry fly or the nymphs, and they're just rising in the water, and you find another fish. It's finding what works for you, but give everything a go. I think we've probably had the best of it when we were here before, and it's just been one of those days where that's fishing. Is probably the best way to describe it. I think we've risen some fish, we've had some fun. I've got to play with a bit of, chuck fly on a split cane rod, and it's been a lovely day. We've seen some rising fish, but yeah, I think probably now, we've seen the best of it. There may be something happening later on this evening, but again, those fish don't seem completely locked on. So it's one of those.
And how did you find the split cane experience? I am I love them, and the chance to fish one I always will take, and they're always in my hand when I'm fishing them. They're a little bit different. As I've always said, and if you know me, you know I'm not elitist or anything like that. I don't do it for that reason. I just do it because it's fun, and I think they're kind of fun to cast. How did you find that?
It was very different. It was nice to cut once I slowed it down and sort of put a bit of thought into it. Really nice to cast, and as I said to you at the time, but we go fishing for fun, and if fishing that rod makes you smile because you're fishing that rod, isn't that half the fun? We've having said everything slowed down, there's a fish just sort of risen out on the far bank, just in some shade. So I might throw a fly for that before we go. But yeah, we go fishing for fun. Ultimately, that's why any of us do it, and it's if that's your what is fun for you, and it is a fun rod to fish. It's beautifully made, and that's your thing. Then great. A lot of people now are fishing sort of glass, and chucking dry flies with glass on small streams and really enjoying it. And actually, when you come home from a day's fishing, you're supposed to have a smile on your face.
Nicely put. And it's funny, my dog's marked that fish. He saw that rise as well. He's waiting for Harry to go and make a cast. So he's going to go and do that. I'm going to walk up a tiny bit, see if anything has changed. I was sort of doing a little bit of blind casting downstream just because I fancied doing some casting. I sort of done the hosty bit, and I threw a cast at a fish we thought might be on a May, but wasn't. And we're going to have a look up a little bit further. It was just nice to sort of have a little bit of a go. We'll see if anyone's going, but I think Harry summed it up perfectly, that it looks as though things have quietened down. But we'll see. We'll give it a little bit longer, and seeing a fish rising always lifts spirits, and it's always exciting to see. So we've been watching, and it looks, as Harry said, it may pick up a little bit later in the evening. We'll see. But the wind's probably eased a tiny bit now. Where we are is nicely sheltered anyway, and we've been watching and waiting for signs, and we were both saying it's harder to spot with sunnies on. Obviously we're casting with them on, but when we're spotting, because some of the rises can be so subtle. It's been a wonderful day. Harry's been excellent company. I would have loved him to have got a shot at one of these big guys, and after yesterday I thought, we might be in the game here. They may just be having a look, and it appears that I must have just got lucky and hit it at the right time, and it was just the right place, right time, so I feel very lucky for that. I'm sure we'll end up talking once I've turned off the mic, but it's been great. I've had a great day fishing with you, a great company, you're knowledgeable. I've learned some stuff watching you fish as well, which has been great. I love, and we've talked off mic and we've talked on mic about your passion for fishing, for the rivers, for everything that goes on. I guess the tour didn't quite live up to how I hoped it would today, yet nonetheless it's been no poorer day for it. And I've just had a great day fishing with you today, Harry.
Yeah, I've had a fantastic day. It's just lovely to fish a new bit of river, a new river. I'm very lucky. Where I live, I walk my dogs quite often on a Sunday at the head of this river, and we were talking off mic about how beautiful it is up at Bellstone out on the moor at the where it rises, and so it's lovely to come down here, fish a new bit of river, fish with somebody new, talk fishing, and the day's gone pretty quick, and as I say, I've had a great time, and thank you very much for inviting me down here.
You're most welcome, and I'm sure we're going to stand here for 5 or 10 minutes longer in the hope that somebody shows themselves. It would be cool if that happened. It feels as though we got another fish in us, but it's been a grind out day. Yet, like I say, it's not been about that. But you often feel a tiny, tiny bit of pressure when somebody's fishing your home water that you want them to feel the way that you do about it. I think a little bit of that has rubbed off. And, Harry was saying off mic, well, you'll have to invite me back down again. So that'll certainly be happening. But yeah, it's, it feels almost summerish here with that. Just it's that breeze really that's made it a little bit cooler, hasn't it?
Yeah, it was nice and warm this morning, and it has just it cooled a little bit this afternoon. It's warmed up again. I mean, we're both in sort of long sleeve t-shirts, and waders. It's not been a cold day, and as I say, there has been we've had flies trickling off all day, but maybe those fish they just need another few days to really sort of wake up and look up. One or two have played the game. So yeah, as I say, I've had a fantastic day and really enjoyed it.
Well, I'm not ending it now because I think I've seen a good fish rise. So I'm going to point it out to Harry and we're going to have a look at it. So we might get a bit on the end. But Harry, thank you so much for being a guest on the Fly Culture podcast. What are your social media handles? How can people find you? You're doing some guiding as well. You're qualified and you're doing some guiding. How can people find you?
Yeah, I'm Facebook, Harry Chance, or I do have a page, Westcountry Fly Fishing. I've got to be honest, that one sort of gets lost occasionally and doesn't get I'm not as good on that. I'm pretty active on Instagram, Westcountry Fly Fishing on Instagram, and that's sort of where you can get in contact with me. There's a website which is again westcountryflyfishing.com. So yeah, if anybody does want to get in touch, you can find me on there.
Nice one. Harry, thank you so much for being a guest on the Fly Culture podcast today.
No, thank you. It's been, I've had a great day. And as I say, seen a new river, which is always special.
Thank you so much, everyone, for listening to the Fly Culture podcast. There'll be plenty more coming down the line very, very soon. We may put an add-on bit to this, dependent what happens. I'm going to point the fish out. I don't know, did you see it? No, so Harry's not seen it, so I'm going to try and point it out. It was one of those really subtle rises. I think it's a big fish. So there may be an add-on bit to this, but we'll have to wait and see. If not, thank you so much for listening. There'll be plenty more editions of the Fly Culture podcast coming down the line very, very soon.
The Fly Culture podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly print magazine. For more information, please visit flyculturemag.com. You can also find Fly Culture on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter.